It has been quite a while since the last Ashes of Appomattox devlog or update, and since then many things have happened. Since the last update, a little while after it, I took a break from the mod just from overall burnout of working on it, and after coming back I've decided to completely wipe the mod and, change a whole lot of things with it. All these changes and the, progress that I've made so far I'll go over in this video, but to start it with, you'll notice that the country selection screen is very different than it had been previously. From left to right, well, from just center to left, you have the Confederate aligned world order. Whether or not they're on this side doesn't strictly determine whether or not they're pro-Confederate, but more so that they tend to work together against having mutual enemies, just shared, I don't really know the correct term, but, they're not enemies, they tend to be friendly with one another and operate on the same world order. Meanwhile, to the right, you have the United States of America, and its side, where it be the Japanese world order, the Russians, or the French. There are currently 5 nations, which I've been, hold on, let me count. Yeah, 5 nations. I don't know why I had to count that, I just did this a second ago. But there are 5 nations which have content currently added. I'll be going over these nations in the order which I worked on them. First, I started the United States of America, which has had many things changed, whether it be its lore or just, having content now. It is drastically different than it was before. They're still led by Robert M. La Follette and his Progressive Party, but other than that, its outward appearance hasn't changed much. Heading on to the next nation which I worked on was the United Kingdom of Great Britain, formerly just Great Britain in the current available version of the mod. They were the second nation that I worked on just because of their pivotal role in the AOA story and them being the main focus of the mod. Many things have changed with Britain, whether it be their lore, their approach to the world, their control over the world even, their borders have changed, their colonies have changed. Many things have changed with Britain, which I'll be going into further. They're still led by Edward VIII and the monarchists, but this will change eventually. There will be reform, unlike the currently available version where it just sticks to hardline monarchism. And for the third nation which I began working on was the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic. They're still led by Mikhail Tukhachevsky, who is now the great commander with his country leader trait. But many things have changed with Russia. Whenever I started working on them, I realized just how strong they really were. In the current available version of the mod, they're in a weakened position. They're pushed back, they've lost a lot of land stuff, whether it even be Belarus or Georgia. But I've changed this. Their breakaway republics still exist, but they're weaker. The Russians have a much greater control over the land. This is from just, how strong the Russian military truly is after I looked into it, but due to their overall strength, I also had to give them some additional crutches to weaken them so they wouldn't just roll over the world stage and just, in the entire plot of the mod. They currently have a focus tree, which I'll be going over along with custom ideology, or I'll be going over the ideology changes and whatnot later, so I don't want to delve into it now. But the nation I worked on after the RSSR was the Empire of Japan. Japan itself is a major player within the mod, specifically the East Asian theater, and whether it be Australia or, the British Raj, India, they are very active in the region. They are one of the rising powers of the world. Quite frankly, they're the only nation which stands in direct opposition to the United Kingdom of Great Britain, and are the only ones who have a real chance of, posing against the British world order. Many things have changed with them. Their lore still has stayed the same, but their territories, their colonies, and whatnot have changed significantly, along with the inclusion of content for their nation now. The most recent nation, which I have worked on, and was working on before starting this, its content is not yet down, but I was working on it before I started this video, was the German Empire. As you can see, they're no longer led by Wilhelm III, though he is still a prominent figure within the German nation and German politics. The nation is now led by Heinrich Brüning, under his own, democratic ideology, which we'll get into more later. But while Wilhelm III is still a constitutional monarch who has significant sway over the nation, you will now start as Heinrich Brüning and take part in the elections that go on within the nation. Along with the leadership change in the German Empire, I've also changed the borders of Germany and some overall lore, as you can see here. Now, I won't go any further. We'll start off with America and go throughout all of the nations and all the other changes. Before we dive into the United States of America, I'm going to go over the ideology changes and how the new system works. In the original version of AOA, there were vastly many more sub-ideologies within the original 4 ideologies of Hearts of Iron 4, but now there are many additional ideologies rather than just large umbrella ideologies. And this new system is more reflective of other mods such as the Fire Rises, Kaiserreich, or any other similar mods. I'll go over the following ideologies, which is now available in the new system, though each of these will have a sub-ideology which I won't be getting into in this devlog. From top to bottom, the order is libertarian socialism, social democracy, social liberalism, market liberalism, conservative democracy, authoritarian democracy, totalitarian socialism, authoritarian socialism, fascism, national socialism, and despotism. The United States starts off as a social democracy, specifically under progressivism, and each nation will operate differently with its own leaders, and though the ideologies are now much more fractured, it won't give you a major stability debuff unless your government is severely unpopular. Now that that's gotten out of the way, we will begin with the United States of America, which you can see it starts with quite a few national spirits, those being isolation as tradition, political gridlock, the Great Depression, waning Dust Bowl crisis, fragmented union, legacy of defeat, and an underfunded military. You can see that some GFX are missing, though this is only temporary and won't be the issue or won't be the case whenever the mod releases, or the next update releases for the mod. Taking a look at the American focus tree, we can see that many things have changed, which I will be going over in depth. Before I get started on the specific internals of the American focus tree, I want to explain the new focus layout and how focus trees work in AOA in the current version which I've been working on. So in the version which is available, nations have a variety of paths based on each ideology, similarly to how they do in base Hoi 4 or other Hoi 4 mods. However, I've changed this in order to speed up the production process and simplify focus tree development. Now, each nation will start off with its historical path, and most nations won't get additional paths, though some still will. The way that you will secure these paths or switch to these paths won't be the generic taking a focus, completing a decision. Instead, you'll have to unlock a whole new tree through drastic events changing your nation outside of the Ashes of Appomattox timeline, or the historical timeline of it. Now that that's out of the way, I'll go over the focuses in the American focus tree and the order in which you're supposed to take them. The first focus is the end of the American dream, which gives an event giving the general runover of the United States and what has happened to it. Afterwards, you will wait until the 1936 elections take place, or was it 37? 36. The 1936 elections take place, after which the Republicans will win, and you can complete a few focuses, though it won't be long until the revanchists within the American government and population submit their demands for the reclamation of Manifest Destiny. Once this has happened, you'll be placed on a time limit where you must reclaim a variety of territories which are seen as American by the revanchists, whether that be Alaska, the northern territories controlled by Canada, New England, plus the Canadian metropolitan regions, whether it be Baja California, Cuba, or the Confederacy, and some other islands, of course. But the way this will work is you have many claims and war rolls against nations, and throughout these there are only 2 which you may fail. If you fail any other wars or battles other than these specific 2, then you will have failed the reclamation for Manifest Destiny, and your nation will collapse, which is the historical path leading on to the Act 2 of the United States of America. But the 2 which you may lose is securing Greenland, which will unlock a decision to have a naval battle against Britain rather than fighting them outright, and expanding the Alaskan claim, which allows a naval battle between Japan over Chokuchi Island. Failing these two won't have any major effect other than a loss of war support. However, if you were to fail any others, such as crushing the England next door, claiming Cuba, moving into the Great White North, integrating Baja, or our mortal enemy, your nation will collapse and all the lands which you had seized previously will fall back into their former owners. Once this has been completed, you will then unlock the A Step Away from Radicalism focus. This focus allows you to move away from the revanchists and cool down the American public while also reintegrating your new territories and re-Americanizing these breakaway states and occupied territories, which you've since reclaimed. After you've done this, or you can choose to delay it, you may go back to your political path, your main Republican path, where you solve the woes of the nation, whether it be the Great Depression, the Dust Bowl crisis, or just any other factor, along with some general buffs such as the farm bloc, and just some other benefits such as popularity support, some political power, and advisors, political advisors. Finally, you have a generic military path, which isn't entirely generic as it modifies a national spirit, which negatively affects your nation, but it's just there since it's expected for most nations to have a military path. Moving on to the next nation, we have the United Kingdom of Great Britain, formerly Great Britain, which has changed not only in its content, its lore, but also in its borders. We can see here in Africa, rather than being under direct British control, many territories are colonies now. Colonies, protectorates, dominions, rather than being under direct British rule, closer to how they were in real life. Starting from bottom to top, we have the Dominion of South Africa, the Dominion of Rhodesia, which was formerly a colony, the Crown Colony of Mozambique, the Protectorate of Madagascar, the Crown Colony of Angola, the British Congo Territory, the Crown Colony of Tanganyika and Zanzibar, the Crown Colony of Kenya, the Protectorate of Uganda, the Protectorate of Ethiopia, the Protectorate of Somalia, the Kingdom of Egypt, which operates as a colony, the Crown Colony of Nigeria, the Crown Colony of Ghana, along with the British administered territories which still remain, the Protectorate of Yemen, the Protectorate of Oman, the Kingdom of Iraq, the Mandate of Syria, the Emirate of Transjordan, and the Mandate of Palestine. We will go on to the Asian ones, but first I want to take a second to pause and look at the Republic of Turkey. In the current available version of the mod, Turkey is a supervised government under liberal leadership. However, I've changed this to still be a supervised republic, however under Fevzi Sakmak and the authoritarian democratic conservatives/nationalists. They are still constitutional monarchist, but this will, alter their path from being liberal at the start to being conservative. Now, heading over to the Asia, we have the British Raj, which you can tell has gained and lost territories. Firstly, they no longer control Yunnan or Afghanistan, as I saw these as too unreasonable and just not realistic within the AOA timeline. Though Afghanistan could have worked, it wouldn't have been a British target over how costly it would have been. Historically, the UAE, Qatar, and Kuwait were all under a Raj administration, which can be seen here with their integration into the Raj's territories. Heading further east, we have the Crown Colony of the East Indies, the Federated Malay Territories, and the Dominion of Australasia. Now, we can head back to Europe, where Britain is, to look at their actual content. First, we can see their national spirits, that being British exceptionalism, masters of the waves, the empire upon which the sun never sets, capital of the world, economic stagnation, bureaucratic overextension, imperial fatigue, colonial overdependence, and political fragmentation. Taking a look at the focus tree, you can see the first section where you try to manage your economic stagnation and other woes within the nation to prevent the London Stock Exchange's crash, though this is inevitable and these focuses only give the players something to do until that occurs. Once the London Stock Exchange crashes, this focus branch will be locked out, and instead, after Mosley submits his demands for reform, you will then unlock the second path. I will get into explaining the lore changes so that we can get to the second branch of the British focus tree, but in the original and current version of AOA, Britain, after the LSE crashes, suffers a three-way civil war between the monarchists in the east, the Republicans in the west, and the fascist monarchist constitutionalists in the north. Now, this has changed to where after the LSE crashes, Oswald Mosley and his followers submit their demands for reform, that being a parliamentary republican or parliamentary constitutional monarchy, which is historically accepted in the new version of the war. Once this is accepted, Mosley begins a series of focuses which will solve the nation's woes, whether it be the Great Depression, the colonies breaking away, or just a variety of other things, such as the Mosley Constitution. Over here we can see, once the London Stock Exchange crashes, the colonies, dominions, and overseas territories of Britain break away. After this occurs, you may, under Mosley, return to some of your colonies to seek influence within the region and reclaim your lost territories. This starts with either the return to South Africa or the Indian Expedition. The Indian Expedition allows you to participate in the partition wars to supply units in the Raj to attempt to gain control over the region once more. The return to South Africa allows you to complete focuses like maintaining influence in Egypt, reasserting influence in the East Indies, securing the Golden Coast, and reintegrating the Suez. These four are roughly the same, where you communicate with the colonies, attempting to bring them back into the fold, though with more autonomy. Should they refuse, you will of course have you will have the ability to intervene militarily, but reintegrating the Suez is specifically unique, as in AOA, whenever the British Empire collapses, the Suez isn't directly seized by another nation or even Egypt itself. Rather, the British forces there declare an occupation zone and maintain their control until either until the Egyptians take them out, or until Britain stabilizes and either they request to rejoin with the empire or the reintegrating the Suez focus is completed. Once again, there is another generic military focus tree, though there is one focus of importance, that being restoring the legacy of triumph, which, once you've quelled Japanese expansionism, you will be able to gain the legacy of triumph national focus, or national spirit, my apologies. Heading over to the east, we have the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic, which you might have been able to tell has had some border changes, specifically in Georgia, Ukraine, Belarus, Latvia, and Estonia. I'll begin explaining these. After having started developing content for the RSSR, I realized their extremely strong position and decided to change these borders to better reflect them, whether that be in Abkhazia of Georgia, in eastern Ukraine, which will lead up to a follow-up war in Ukraine, or in taking the territories which Belarus controlled in western Russia, such as Smolensk, or any of these remaining territories, Kaluga, Bryansk, etc. Also allowed the Russians to push into Latvia and Estonia to further represent their control over the region. Looking up north, Finland still controls Karelia plus St. Petersburg, though this will change throughout the Great March, formerly the Great March West. Taking a look at the Russian national spirit, we see the vanguard of the revolution, operational state system, militarized bureaucracy, logistical overreach, second five-year plan, fractured republic, a prolonged revolution, and a severe famine. Looking to their focus tree, we can see that they have the path of Marxism-Leninism starting their focus tree, which will allow them to solve the issues such as the severe famine, the logistical overreach, as well as some industrial bonuses with the completing the five-year plan and beginning the third five-year plan. Heading over to the center, we see the preparation for a revolutionary action, which once completed gives the event the Great March. Read me. Once you complete this focus, it basically tells you how the Great March works, which I will now read. The Great March is a series of wars for the Russian Soviet Socialist Republic to re-establish control over former Russian territories. Your initial advance is a locked sequence. You cannot proceed down the focus tree until you have used the war goal gained from the preceding focus and capitulated the target nation. Once you have conquered Kazakhstan, which will change to Turkestan once the nation names are fixed, which I will get into later at the end of the video, the focus finalizing the revolution will become available, which is here. Completing this focus will remove this restriction, allowing you to queue up the remaining war goal focuses at will. If you hesitate and leave the remaining nations alone for too long, they will take the initiative and invade you instead. The way this works is that when completing any of these focuses, let's say you want to invade Estonia, you complete this focus and then you invade Estonia. However, you cannot complete pushing into Latvia, return to the Caucasus, or returning to the home of the revolution until after you have capitulated and annexed Estonia. This will work all the way until you complete crushing the Southern Union, which will unlock the finalizing the revolution focus. Once you've capitulated Turkestan, this focus will unlock, allowing you to queue up the remaining focuses, whether it be war goals against the Cossacks, the Polish, the Ukrainians, or the Japanese. Though if you hesitate, these nations will collaborate together to take you down rather than giving you the advantage of declaring war on them. Once you've defeated all of these nations and reclaimed your former land, you may then complete the focus integrating the new republics, which will allow you to regain cores on your former and new territories. Heading over to the far right, we see the War Department focus, or the Department of War, which is once again another generic military focus branch, though it is unique in that being the naval branch rather than being on the side like the Air Force or Army is at the bottom. This is because the Russian Navy is destroyed and you are left with only an Army and Air Force, which you need to complete the construction of in order for the Great March, before you can worry about rebuilding a navy. Heading to the east, we see many different things in Eastern Asia, that being in the lands which Japan directly controlled in China and Vietnam, Indochina, are now under puppet regimes and other governments rather than Japan itself. Starting from top to bottom, the East, what was it called? I don't remember the name, but currently the East Siberian Army, what was it? Let me recall the name. I'm really blanking, I can't remember the name. The Administration of the Far East, that's what it was. But it is now called the East Siberian Army. This is only temporary and is a bug due to the ideology system change, which will be fixed before this update releases. Looking at the Administration of the Far East, they are still led by Konstantin Radzaevsky. However, they have two national spirits which are shared with all Japanese colonies. These being the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere and the Zaibatsus. I'll get into these more later, but now we'll head into the Empire of Manchukuo, which is led by Zhang Jingwei and Emperor Puyi, though you cannot see him here. Moving on to the formerly controlled territories in China, which Japan held, they are now under the occupation of the Chinese Provisional Republic, led by Wang Jingwei. The cities such as Qingdao, Yantai, Weihai, and Tianjin are still controlled by Japan directly, though. Heading to the south, the cities like Macau and Guangzhou are now under control by the South Chinese Economic Zone, which is led by Kishi Nobusuke, and he operates under the Zaibatsus as an ultra-capitalist corporate state. Looking to the Philippines, their name is also in error. It should be the Republic of the Philippines. However, they are led by Benigno Romas, same as they were previously and in the current available version. The Empire of Vietnam, which was formerly under direct Japanese control, is now led by Nguyen Van Tam. They will eventually have their own unique national spirit representing their emperor, same as Japan has with Emperor Showa. Now that we have the colonies out of the way, we'll get to the bread and butter of the Eastern Asian bloc, that being Japan itself. Japan has a few starting focuses, or starting national spirits, my apologies, those being the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, Zaibatsus, Inter-Service Rivalry, the Strain of Empire, Economic Saturation, and Emperor Showa. These are each their own thing and will operate throughout the focus tree, which we'll get into later. However, the East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere is meant to represent the cooperation between the nations and their economies, though it can be used to exploit the colonies later in the focus tree, which we will see. And these are pretty much self-explanatory. Heading into the Japanese focus tree, we can see over here that they start off with the Empire at Dawn focus. This will give an event giving the rundown of Japan along with the Empire at Dawn national spirit. Heading over to the far left, you can loosen the Manchurian restraints, which will allow the Empire of Manchukuo to pursue intervention in Mongolia. Next up, you have the overheating engine, which allows you to solve your economic saturation, get political advisors, and modify the Zaibatsu national spirit. To the center, you have the Reign of Harmony, which gives compliance on occupied states along with the core of Taiwan. You can then complete the Emperor's Guidance to gain some small additional buffs to the Emperor's Showa national spirit. To the right, you may stabilize the diet, getting some political advisors along with some other generic benefits to your stability and ideology support. After this, you can develop the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere by building railways, civilian factories, and providing equipment to your colonies. You may then also enforce the yen upon these colonies and members of the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, which will grant them a greater factory output along with you, though they will pay an additional 2.5% consumer goods factor, while you receive a negative 2.5% consumer goods factor, boosting your industry. To the next side of this, you have the Yamato Industrial Standards, which are more benefits to the industry of all members of the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity Sphere, which adopt them, those being your colonies. The main part of this, though, is to get Siam into your alliance. This is done through Siamese economic developments, which they historically will accept, providing a large amount of industrial aid, focuses that boost their national spirits, that boost their industrial output, and new equipment for their army. Once you've developed Siam, you may extend the Blossom Branch to get them into your alliance. To the right of this, you have Perform Under Heaven, modifying the Empire at Dawn national spirit and the Showa spirit, granting quite a few meaty bonuses to the Emperor Showa national spirit. Next up, you have moderating the Kodaha demands, which they will make in the next month after game start during the February elections of 1936. The Kodaha will demand a variety of things such as control of the Zaibatsus, spiritual reform, and governmental reform. It will be your job to moderate these demands by empowering imperial scholars, expelling compromised bureaucrats, opening committees to investigate corruption among the Zaibatsu corporations and colonial administrations, along with reining in the Zaibatsus. Finally, this all culminates in the focus and end to the Southern Contender, granting a war goal against the Dominion of Australasia, the Crown Colony of the East Indies, and the Federated Malay Territories. Once you've completed this focus and successfully won the war over East Asia, and have completed guaranteeing prosperity for all, you may then complete the Empire at Twilight, which is the culminating focus for the Empire of Japan. This will replace the Empire at Dawn national spirit with the Empire at Twilight, granting some additional bonuses to both your war support, surrender limit, and just economic abilities. Over to the right, we have the more military branch, which is still generic as they all are, though it has two unique ones. This being Invoking the Warrior Spirit, which ups your conscription, while also allowing you to use kamikaze strikes. To the right of this, we have the focus Intervention in the Partition Wars, which allows you to send a military force to directly intervene in the British Raj's civil war, potentially gaining you control over the entire Indian subcontinent. This, like I'll just go over shortly, is additional bonuses, dockyards, etc. Nothing more to be mentioned, and this is all for Japan. Heading over to the final nation, we have the German Empire, which you can see has had its borders changed, this being to reflect the greater control and chance of victory within the German Empire over the region, rather than making them a rump state which has basically no chance at survival. Now they control many more regions, pushing the communists further back west and allowing them to have a fighting chance. Moving on to the German Empire's starting national spirits, we have the Divided Identity, an Economy of Restoration, Wilhelm III, Political Fragmentation, and Social Unrest. Taking a look at their focus tree, we can see that they start with the Shadow of Revolution focus, which gives a rundown of how Germany has entered its current situation. Moving on, you have the Kaiser True, which will cause a split and occur automatically during the next election season, splitting Heinrich Böning and his democratic allies from the Authoritarian Democracy Alliance, which is the Kaiser's party. Or, it's a coalition, but the Republicans and the monarchists will split off in this alliance. This will empower but further divide Germany, or it will empower the monarchists but further divide the nation, but it will then unlock the pro-monarchist path, such as the principles of coherence, a one Germany policy, and a state worth serving. Moving on to the right, we have permitting limited suffrage, which is meant to reflect the social change and the republicanism which is taking hold in Germany, while also forming their I can't pronounce it, but you can say it. Next up, you can expunge radical progressives, which will remove the full Republicans, which are not constitutional monarchists, from the nation, and not from the nation, but rather from the political system, which will alienate them, decrease your stability, but increase your overall support within the nation by removing your enemy's control over the political establishment. Next up, you can complete a series of focuses to modify the economy of restoration and strengthen your economy. You may then create shock response units and partake in unit infiltration to bust the socialist and full-on Republicans even further than they had before. This culminates in tending to the future, pushing Germany down a more traditional monarchist path. May crack down on socialist nodes which have retained or remained within your nation even after the Civil War cooled down, allowing you to, like I said earlier, complete the state worth serving focus. Once you've completed the state worth serving focus, it will unlock the culmination of the monarchist branch, allowing you to alienate the Republicans, reaffirm the imperial mandate, and fully empower Wilhelm III. Once you've empowered Wilhelm III, you may implement a policy of guided parliamentarism. After the London Stock Exchange crashes, this branch over here will open up, which will not be visible upon game start and will only become visible once the LSE crashes. This focus is to be last, and I will explain that shortly. Over here, you will complete a series of focuses, passing laws, cooperating with foreign nations, and utilizing the military to solve the Great Depression. Once you've completed these, you may then complete the Kaiserliches Wirtschaftswunder, I'll likely butcher that, which will remove the Great Depression national spirit and add the Kaiserliches Wirtschaftswunder national spirit. It is important that I mention that when the LSE crashes, the economy of restoration, which culminates in absolute economic authority, and the Kaiserliches Wirtschaftsordnung, once the LSE crashes, all of these benefits will be taken away, and you'll be set back to zero with these, though once you complete Kaiserliches Wirtschaftswunder, you will get a greater national spirit than you had previously with Kaiserliche Wirtschaftsordnung. Over here to the left, we have the reunifying the fatherland, which can be completed once you have completed the focus the One Germany policy and have empowered Wilhelm III. It will go about this top focus, which will give you a war goal against the communist Germans to the west, and once you've capitulated them, you then unlock the remaining focus tree, or focus branch. This culminates in, or begins with, putting down communist sentiment and reintegrating the lost German territories that the communists had formerly controlled, along with building up the economies of these regions, which I had forgotten to mention a second ago. Once you have reintegrated the region, you may then extend into the Rhineland, bringing the Rhineland back under your fold, demand Eastern Prussia back from Poland in exchange for some assistance in their wars and other events going on. Then, next, you may reintegrate Bavaria. Since they are monarchists, they will accept your demands and reintegrate into Germany rather easily. Finally, after reintegrating all of these German lands, you may complete the reunification of the Empire focus, which will grant cores on all your lost or on your new territories, which you've acquired in reforging Germany, along with giving some nice bonuses via a national spirit. After completing this, you may then extend your empire through Austria while completing a non-Schlussreich focus, bringing Austria into the German Reich. While they don't yet have a military branch, it is of course coming, as it is generic at this point and will be in every single focus tree, though the Germans themselves I can't guarantee, but likely will have a more unique military branch meant to represent the Prussian legacy of infantry and just a boost to infantry tactics. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I would get into some of the errors which are new in this version which I'm working on, and this is the section where I'll be covering them. Here you can see that some nations don't have names, the name of some nations are wrong, and they're just incorrect compared to what they're supposed to be lore-wise. Along with that, we also have miscolored nations, not being the color of a British colony, and leaders missing, along with ideologies being horrible. The reason for all of this is, of course, due to the changes in the ideology system and the way it works. This has changed the way the game reads nation names, for example, the East Siberian Army, which will be fixed along with all the others in due time, of course. Heading over to Africa with the colors of the nations. This is simply because they are now new and do not formally have the color assigned to them, which is needed for British colonies, so this will be fixed, of course. Finally, for the messed up ideology wheels and the missing leaders, this is once again a consequence of the new ideology system. This will be fixed as I work on each nation. As I reach it, I will fix their ideology system and to set their proper ideology support and their proper leaders. That is everything for this video and all that I'll be going over in it, since it's mostly all that's been changed. If you have any questions or feel that I left something out, leave a comment. I'll always respond to it as soon as I see it, or you can join the Discord and add me, and I will of course respond there too. If you're interested in contributing in any way and have any experience or just any way you can contribute to the mod, its development, the acquisition of resources for it, feel free to shoot me a message on Discord or leave a comment and let me know. Development will continue and will likely pick up pretty soon compared to what it is now. I'm getting roughly one nation out every 1 to 2 weeks with my new system of the historical focus only, but I can't guarantee that it'll all be ready, though I am aiming for a release date of sometime around December. Until then, I hope you all keep up to date with the mod and its ongoings, and that's all I really have to say for this video.